Mold us, Lord, as the potter's clay. Fire us, Lord, with the Spirit today. Shape us, Lord, in the likeness of Jesus, your Son, so may His flock may continue what the Great Shepherd has begun. What the Great Shepherd has begun.
Well, hello once again. I'm Andy Johnson, and welcome to the third in a special series of discussions here on Shepherd's Corner with the Archbishop, His Grace Charles Jason Gordon, on the church in society. In this episode, we want to look at the church in education in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, Archbishop, good to have you once again.
Good to be back with you, Andy.
All right. Well, let's start sort of on a broad platform, on a broad canvas. Let me ask you, is there a single issue or there are a couple of major issues that you see as head of the church in this diocese on as the church's role in education?
Well, that's a big question. How long we have?
We'll see what we can do.
There are a number of major issues. Some of them I would call legacy. Some of them is lack of updating. And some of them would be what I would say the purpose of education for the type of citizen, for the kind of society we're emerging into. That we don't have a fit between those three things. And so if I want to start there, I keep telling our teachers, a child that comes into school today, you are educating that child for the workplace of 2035. That workplace is going to be using tools that we don't know about, technology that hasn't been invented, thinking about things and having jobs that we don't even think about as yet, which means it's a different form of different type of workplace than the last century, where we had mass production, where what you needed is children to be disciplined, to do things en rote, to be able to remember, to be able to follow orders clearly, and do a number of special tasks that a mass production society needed. And the education system was designed for that. We are trying to educate children of this century in a form of classroom that existed not in the 20th, but for the 19th century, and with technology at their availability today. And all of this is a terrible mismatch of your child, the kind of education you need for the type of society that you need to get to. And so if I have to start, that's where I will start.
Yeah, and you're probably saying that we're not where we are today, educating that child for 15 years from now.
I'm saying most of our classrooms are 19th century classrooms. Not 20th century, not 21st century. We have 19th century classrooms, 19th century methodologies. The rote method of learning, where you expect a child to remember a whole lot of stuff, doesn't understand that Google gets 100 million questions a day and can answer you on anything you want to know. So McLuhan, who is the grandfather of media theory, would say that every new technology is an extension of the human. Every new technology is an amputation of the human. And the new technologies we have don't require the kind of facts memorized that we used to need before, when Encyclopedia Britannica was the only thing at home that you could check a fact on. Now it's in your hands. So this child of today, the key thing is not about facts. It's about innovation. It's about creativity. It's about adaptation. It's about taking knowledge from one sphere and applying it to new spheres. Because if you're going to be working with technology that has not yet been developed or brought into being, then you have to be transferring your knowledge from one place to the next. And that means you have to have a different way of understanding education if Trinidad and Tobago is going to be the 21st century country that we all desire that it becomes.
So what do we do to, I'm not sure if making amends is the right term. How do we create a fix for that now?
Well, we have to start by drilling into some of the other problems. So if you said, you asked me the one big one.
Yes.
So that to me is a major one. Because even if I fix the problems that are seemingly most glaring, we will not address that other problem. Because the most glaring is that so many of our children are failing in so many of our schools that are failing, and I would add in so many of our communities that are failing. So that's another big problem. But if you fix that, it still doesn't mean you get into 21st century education. So I'm saying let's set the bar first in terms of the kind of education, depending on the kind of society we want to become. Then say, okay, let's start with where we have some really serious challenges. The serious challenges, for me, for where I see it, the first is the number of schools that are failing. And we'll talk to that. The second challenge is that a number of our teachers that are not up to speed with educational models for the 21st century. A third one I would say is persistent poverty in Trinidad and Tobago. And if you want to ask me which is the most serious of all of those, I would say the persistent poverty is really the number one challenge. We've been doing an experiment in 4 schools that have been on academic watch. And here's some
and this is for the listeners who may not know what that is. Those are schools that are not doing as well as they should be, but that is probably putting it mildly. They're not doing well, and therefore...
They have 3 categories: schools on academic watch, schools that are mostly doing okay, and schools that are doing excellent. Yeah. So these are the bottom tier schools. So we have 4 schools, 2 of ours and 2 government schools. And we looked into what's some of the problem. And one of the things we've figured out is a child at 5 years old that comes from a poor community hasn't had the nutrition, nor have they had the stimulation that a child from a middle class community would have. Which means that the brain development of that 5-year-old child is not the same as the brain development of the middle class child. Which means that that child is not yet ready for language in the way that the middle class child comes ready for language, because mommy and daddy have been reading stories to them since they're 1 and 2. And that act of reading, that the colorful mobile that is hanging over the crib that stimulates the visual and all the different senses of that child, the amount of touch and hold and feel that child will get, the kind of nutrition, all prepares that child's brain for language. Now, when you come at 5 years old, you're not prepared for language. And what are you doing for the first 2 years? Language and maths. That's what you're doing. You learn within your first year that this thing called school, I'm not cut out for that. And so a child at 5, 6, 7 who is not prepared for language at that stage comes into the first year, and what they're doing in the language that they're learning that they are not ready for language. And that in fact they're learning that they are deficient, they're dumb, they're stupid, they're ignorant. And these are some of the words that children get told at 5 years old. And rather than us saying, well, this child is not yet ready for language, let's get them ready, the child is being labeled and carries that label right through their school system.
I don't want to go back too much, but what do we make of what we were told when we were growing up, that education was your best ticket out of poverty? So children went to school, and parents, whatever their situations were, sent their children to school because they figured that was the ticket out. So something got wrong with that.
Yes, so Dr. Williams, and I have the quote says, in such a colony, both in order to form a society and develop a spirit of community, and in order to train the people for self-governance, education would have an important role to play. Or as we famously say, he said, the future of the nation look in the school bag, as David Rudder coined the phrase. Yeah. Yes, and I think Williams was certainly onto something amazing there, that he understood that if we're going to become a different kind of society, we have to have a different kind of education and access to education for all of our citizens. Otherwise, we'll be leaving citizens behind. But in the rush to do universal education, which I think was not only important, but it was imperative because you can't leave citizens behind, we didn't take into account this poverty gap within the society, and therefore we didn't quite manage what a poorer child would require for education as opposed to a middle class child, as opposed to a rich child. We didn't quite manage that. The richer children or children from the richer homes will pay for the education that child actually needs. The poorer family sends their child to the closest school because they don't have the bus fare for the next school that might actually be doing a lot better. So poverty is one of the great challenges. And I think that if there's an indictment on the education system, there's really an indictment on the lack of social development in Trinidad and Tobago. With the kind of oil and gas money we have been spending over the last how many ever years, that we have pockets of persistent poverty in Port of Spain and in Miaro and in different parts of our country. That to me is a real shame. But now you can't blame the children growing up in poverty and their parents for poor performance in school unless we understand that they need something different than a child who comes from a middle-class family.
Yeah. I'm glad you went there because that, as part of the narrative over the decades since the inception of the Concordat, a lot of people have been looking askance at the fact that some people say that that's an unfair advantage for certain schools and for the Catholic Church when you analyze what people say, that the Concordat allows this percentage of students to be taken in on the basis of whatever choice that the church makes. And a lot of that has to do with parents who can pay. And people see that as something to frown upon.
Well, I will start from the other side. Okay. So I'm dyslexic. At 11, I was unready for any 11 plus exam. At 12, I resat it, and I was a little more ready, but still not quite ready. Just because my aunt had become very friendly with the principal of Fatima College, because her son had died in a road accident and was going to the school, and the principal visited them quite a few times during being pastoral during the time of the tragedy. She said to him, look, my great nephew is sitting in exam. Would you write a recommendation for him? She said, no problem. So he did. And then he went to Ireland, got sick, and never came back. So they found this one recommendation from the principal for me, and I got into the people's school. Now, I would not have gotten to Fatima College. I would not have become the priest. I would not have had the education, the formation, the background. And I would not have become the Archbishop that I am now. So if you want a challenge, I'm happy.
Yeah.
But what I'm...
No, it wasn't because... to the notion that people have about...
But it isn't because I was rich, or but my family was rich. My family was a fairly struggling working class family in Woodbrook. Had been living there for a while, and it was just because of the relationships, which is more how Trinidad works than everything else. So if you look at any of our schools, you don't see a lot of the rich kids coming in on the 20%. In fact, the rich kids are coming in on their own merit because their parents can afford to send them to primary schools. That will ensure that they will pass the exam and do well at that exam. Because the rich kids that might come into a secondary school on the 20% would be those who would have had some learning challenge along the way, therefore wouldn't perform as well as their peers would. And that would be, and I would say that is also a great advantage, that our schools will take children who can do better, but just not at 11 years old. So I went straight in Form 1. By the end of Form 1, I ended up in 1X and went to 3X, which was a 4-year stream. So it wasn't that I didn't have the capacity.
Based on your performance
in the school. Yeah. So I entered in 1C,
yeah.
And they had an exam at the end of the first term, which rearranged everybody. And at the end of that exam, I was in the top 40 boys, and went from there into 3X. and went to on the four-year stream.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a lack of capacity. It was a developmental challenge at the time, and the kind of exam that the 11 plus was, which was a lot of rote learning, that wasn't what my mind did. My mind did big picture and grasping concepts. Yeah. So I was not suited for that exam.
Right, okay. You'd put up a chart on the board there before we started about, with primary schools, which schools are government, which are denominational, and so on.
Yes.
And the denominational boards have, was it 60%? 63%?
63% of all primary schools are run by denominational boards, and most people in Trinidad don't understand that. Yeah. So when Dr. Eric Williams wanted to have full education for everyone, at that stage, the denominations, and that'll be the Hindus, the Muslims, the Presbyterians, the Catholics, the Anglicans, we had more schools than the government had. And even the 25% that the government now have, a lot of those came in afterwards to fill spaces, new communities, etc. So one of the things that people don't understand is the historic legacy of the denominations for education in Trinidad and Tobago. Yep. In the 1800s, we had more schools than the government, by far. And we kept developing more schools throughout. So we had a policy of universal education long before the government of Trinidad and Tobago did.
Right. So the point I want to get to with that is that my feeling, therefore, is that the church, this church, would have more primary schools than the other denominations.
We do.
To what extent that should be used as leverage with the government to determine more the kind of education that is produced and presented in Trinidad and Tobago?
So, 100% agree. I mean, if you look at that graph and you see the 63%, and if all the denominations come together and come to an agreement on what we would like to see for education, I think we'll have a very different kind of conversation. One of the problems is that some of the officials within the Ministry of Education have tried over the last few years to treat the denominational schools as if they have no say and they have no power, and as if they have to accept everything. And that has been a terrible thing, because rather than having a partnership where we accept the historical development of education, accept the roles that we have played, and continue to grow together for the best of all citizens. What we have now is a tug-of-war between the denominational boards and the Ministry of Education.
Yeah, I mean, I was closely following some of those developments back in the first years of the 2000s when the late Clive Borelli was chairman of the Catholic Education Board. And there were big fights at meetings at Queen's Hall.
Major fights.
He leading the fight.
Yes.
Where is that kind of relationship now with the government and the school board?
You know, it's an interesting thing. With the minister, I have a great relationship, but officials come and do foolish things. Last year, one of the first acts I had to do when I became the Archbishop was to write and say that we cannot comply with a regulation where they wanted to have intake forms on primary schools not having religion and no interviews. So in other words, what they're doing, it was against the Concordat. The whole spirit of the Concordat is that we have schools as denominations so that we can educate the children of our faith. And that's the purpose. And what they wanted to do is turn our schools into secular government schools and have us run them still. Well, that can't work.
Yeah. Secular church schools. And it's an oxymoron.
Exactly. And so I challenged it. And I said to the principals, no, I've raised the matter with the ministry and with the minister specifically. And until we have something else happen, please stick to the forms that we've always used. Because, you see, in countries like Canada, they see religion as a kind of a special interest group. America too. And they see, because they see it as a special interest group, they think that we should have no say, the special interest group should have no say in the future development of the country. Yeah. In a country like Trinidad, where it is the denominations that have educated most of the population of this country, you can't act in the same way. So you go out Canada and America, you get trained, you come back with those ideas into us, and you don't understand the whole historical development is different, and the whole sociology is different. Therefore, you're trying to impose upon us an ideology that's not ours. It's an imposed ideology. Start from who we are. This is who we are.
Talking about impositions, do you have an issue with the fact that, well, the courts imposed on a Catholic school that a child should come to that school with where that is not Catholic and is where that is consistent with another religion?
You know, that was an interesting one, and it was a wonderful test, because what I would go the other way also. Once it is okay for a Catholic child to have a cross in a Muslim school and a Hindu school, I'm okay.
But is it?
Well, check and see. We don't live in Arabia or Canada. We live in Trinidad and Tobago. We have people of different religions side by side. My best friend in school is a good Muslim.
In Fatima?
In Fatima. In fact, in Form 5, he won the prize for religion as a good Muslim, which is amazing.
And that religion had to do with Catholicism?
Yeah, he did the whole curriculum we did for Catholicism and won the prize for religion. And that's how Trinidad and Tobago is. That we have this kind of movement. And so I would say that if something is specific to a person's religion, then we should allow that in the school once it is not offensive. And now you open a hornet's nest, because two people start some religion that decide that going naked is the way,
yes,
a religious imperative for them, and now we have another problem. Okay, but let's take religious traditions that are mainstream. So no, but I would say that the Catholic child in a Hindu school, in a Muslim school, should be able to wear a cross, should be able to pray the rosary uninterrupted, should be able to walk around with their rosary if they wanted to. And these things should be allowed on all sides of the equation. And that is what being this wonderful hybrid society that is so amazing in its mixture. That's who we are.
Yeah. And to the extent that you get to influence the nature of the education system, the product of education in Trinidad and Tobago overall, at one level, my understanding of the church is that it promotes an understanding of and development of an appreciation for social justice. Mm-hmm. Is that something you think that should be somewhere in the education system, so that we come up understanding what that is and being oriented to social justice? So
I would say, so in the Catholic tradition, we are about faith and reason. Trinidad and Tobago could do with a lot more reason within the education system. So philosophy, Archbishop Harris was big on this. We need more philosophy taught. So we need a layer of philosophy. Then we need a layer after the philosophy to help children to start reasoning out and have an appropriate kind of conversation, so it doesn't deteriorate into slogans or into name calling and things like that. But on top of that, we need that foundation of understanding what true justice is. Every child at 5 years old already has a sense of fair and unfair. Two children sharing up a piece of cake, and somebody got the bigger half. They already have that sense of fair and unfair. Barbados has a wonderful term. Children say, you have unfaired me. Never heard that one before. But this sense of fairness is so ingrained in us. And one of our gifts as a Catholic Church is this teaching on social justice and all of its principles, and how that works towards having a society that is a just and an equal society, where people receive the dignity that they deserve, and where we are inclusive in that kind of society. How do we teach children for that kind of society? And that's part of the curriculum development that we have to do. On top of that, there's a whole level of thinking. I think of somebody like a C.S. Lewis, somebody like a Tolkien. These Christians of great stature, whose writings are some serious thinking about the societal issues of their day. Now, why can't we expose our children to that kind of thinking, to help them to see if this is how people thought about their society, how are we thinking about our own society today? And train people now to think about the society from the perspective of the Christian identity and the Catholic identity. Those are some of the things I would like to see that are part and parcel of our society. The whole thing of religion and understanding all the religious admixtures in Trinidad and Tobago. And there's a curriculum for comparative religion. And I would like to see that taught in our schools, so that no child coming through a Catholic school would be ignorant about what Islam, what Hinduism, what the Presbyterians have to say about what's core to their belief system, that we would at least start understanding and exposing children to each other.
Yeah, we're talking about secondary schools here.
At secondary school, at the secondary school level. So you
have no problem with the teaching of comparative religion in St. Mary's College or in St. Joseph's Convent?
I would like to see us do, so there's a part of that curriculum where you teach that child in the faith that they are, and then another part of the curriculum where you teach them the comparative religion. Teach them well who we are, and then teach them well what the other religions are, so that they have a very broad understanding of who we are and who others are, so they really start to take down the prejudice that we create and start to have a really informed understanding. Now that's how I think we could build a more incredible Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah. Is there a way to address the reality that a lot of, so the Catholic schools are among the top of the heap? There are some that are in the middle and some that require attention.
Correct.
Let's take the ones at the top of the heap. Those are the ones that everybody who is writing the essay shoots for.
Yeah.
But there's an extent to which children who get to go to a convent or
so let's talk a bit from...
But they don't have a full appreciation of the fact that this is a Catholic education institution.
So let's start first with the primary schools, and then I'll get to the secondary schools and that question. So the graph I have up here is the schools that we have on Academic Watch. And you see in 2011, both us and the government went high. I mean, we ended up to 30-something%. The government went up to 20-something%. But then by 2012, it came back down. Then the government went up, we continued coming down. So if you look from 2011, 2013, and that's the last numbers that the government have in national tests, for whatever reason. They didn't do 14, 15, 16, 17.
6 years behind.
Yeah, so they haven't done that. So this is just the last data. We came right down to 2% under Academic Watch. Those that are mostly effective, you will see that we came down in 2011 and we've gone back up for 2012, 2013, the blue being the Roman Catholic schools. And then if you look at those that are excelling, you see both us and the national schools went down in 2011, shot up in 2012, and come back down in 2013. Now, that might be the exam itself. Because when everybody is going up and down like that, then you have to say this is not a person, this is a whole system. So the orange would be the national average. So you see at least there's something with the exam there that's happening around. But still, we have quite a few of our schools that are in this excelling range. So that's at the primary school level. If I go to the secondary schools, most of and we have a small holdings, 21 secondary schools we have, a small part of that pie. But most of our secondary schools are secondary schools that people want to get into.
Yeah.
Your St. Mary's, your Fatima, your QRC, Fatima, St. Joseph, Providence, etc., etc. So most of them would be what would be called the prestige schools. Those schools have a long, long legacy. The Spiritan Fathers, for instance, and the St. Joseph nuns, the Cluny nuns, the Dominicans, they invested heavily in education. And they had religious who made their whole life's dedication the teaching of a particular subject. If you think of Father Lifehook, I mean, he's a marvel. He could take a curriculum and cut it down very fine and get everybody to understand exactly what you need to understand to do well in an exam. I think once there was a time when they actually queried because they said there's no way that he could have got so many students to do this well. But he was just such an excellent teacher. Now, when you have nuns, priests, that are dedicated to education, and that's their life's work and their vocation, and they dedicate themselves to that, you're going to have schools that are excellent. When those schools no longer have nuns and priests, but they have the traditions that are handed on, that still carry the school forward, you're still going to have excellent schools. And so what we have is a historical legacy of the kind of commitment that was given in the secondary level by a lot of religious. Now that the religious are no longer plentiful and not in our schools at the secondary level anymore, we now have a new challenge.
Well, why is that? Is that because is that a function of the Concordat, or you just don't have enough?
We just don't have enough. That's a worldwide phenomenon. The number of nuns and priests have gone down from the 1970s, 80s, 90s, 2000s.
Who dedicated teachers and dedicated to teaching?
Generally, across the board. So, like the Holy Ghost, who are the teaching order, they don't have that many local young people. And of all of them, Father Gregory is the last one in a Catholic school as a teacher. And if you see...
Principal of Fatima.
Principal of Fatima College. If you see what happened when he became the principal of Fatima College and how he moved that school from really a good school to an excellent school, it's because that's his dedication, that's his vocation. And that's what a religious does for a school, because they put, that becomes their whole life's work. And so it moves the school very differently. What we're doing now is we're recognizing that fact, recognizing that we may never go back to the place where we have as many religious in our schools the way we had in years gone by. But we're starting now to form a group of lay people with the vocation of the teacher catechist, and training them, giving them the same formation that a religious would receive. A degree in theology, the human pastoral, intellectual, spiritual formation, and getting them ready to enter into the schools to be that presence that the nuns and religious used to be.
That's a part of the raison d'etre of the CREDI, the Catholic
That's part of what
Religious
CREDI is
Education
doing.
Development
Yes.
Institute.
Is a big piece of the CREDI mandate. That this is a program that we're going to start in September, and really look to see how can we prepare teachers. So this is not just, so CREDI is already doing the B.Ed in education, which has a deep religious component. We want to do something a little bit more than that, give them the pastoral theological formation. The child of today is asking questions about religion that most people don't have the answers for, unless you've done some study in theology. Because when they ask you about science and religion, and these two narratives, and how can I believe that God exists when science... If you don't have an understanding of that dialogue and that discourse, then it's really difficult to have a religion class. In meeting with some of the secondary students, what I've realized is we have two religions being taught in our secondary schools. We have Catholicism being taught, and we have science being taught. Yeah. And science is a religion. And the reason why I'm saying that is because atheism can never be an essential element of science. Because science is supposed to be observation. And you can't observe atheism. So once the commitment to atheism is a priori, it comes before the scientific commitment, then that's a religious commitment, not a scientific commitment.
Would you go as far as to say or even suggest that things like that shouldn't be taught in a Catholic school?
Well, and here's the problem. The science teacher was trained in a university where secularism and atheism was the dominant thinking. And so the science and the atheism got so mixed up in the tertiary level that when the teacher comes back, he hasn't been able to unpack the science and the religion. So he's giving both as a mismatch. Now, if you take science up to the top levels, at the levels of the people who are looking into cosmology, into space, they see things differently from at a BA level where the science and the atheism are totally entwined. And so but if we don't have people in the school who understand that discourse and can start challenging that discourse and can start having conversations in the school between science and religion departments to really challenge back some of these unfiltered assumptions that good Catholics teaching science are saying because they haven't thought through their own religion, because they haven't had the formation as required. So those are some of the subtexts of dealing with the secondary school that we have to deal with.
All right, we could talk some more about that and other issues on this agenda here, but I know we have something that we want to take a look at and
Yes.
we talk about as we go forward with this discussion.
Gospel train is coming, hear the whistle blow. If you think you're ready, it's almost time to go. Get on board, little children, get on board. Little children, get on board. Little children, there's room for you, room for me, and room for many more. All aboard.
Catholic education, as different from secular education, takes into account two things. One, the graduate of a Catholic school has to be a good citizen of the nation, but also has to be a good citizen of the kingdom of Almighty God.
In Trinidad and Tobago, a unique partnership between the state and denominational school boards offers options for education that reflect the rich multicultural heritage of its diverse people. Alumni of Catholic schools contribute to Trinidad and Tobago's development at all levels, from strengthening village communities to holding highest national office. Professional leadership and teaching is at the heart of all schools managed by the Catholic Education Board of Management.
An important part for me at school is a good character program. When you leave Sacred Heart Girls, you are not only academically sound, because it's important that they leave here as well with good character traits. That's important, especially with what's happening in the wider society today.
Across urban and rural areas, Catholic education is dynamic and relevant to the communities it serves.
In schools where we have been making a lot of improvement or where there's innovation, you find that your principal and your teachers focused first on the child. What can we do to make this child learn? How can we cater to the interests and to the abilities of these children? And when you do that, you tend to provide a curriculum that is flexible, that is broad, and that keeps children interested. And so you use the magic word in education today, it is relevant.
In the agricultural hub of central Trinidad, Tabakit RC Primary School delivers an innovative approach, building on the national curriculum, teaching literacy and numeracy through farming and award-winning agribusiness projects.
I was given the freedom and the flexibility to use agriculture to integrate it with the curriculum, because I have seen that it made a great difference in the holistic development of the children. We have an increase in the attendance, we have improvement in the discipline, even the academic performance of the children, because they were not so motivated to do all the creative writing and mathematics and so on. And now they actually come and beg to do it.
At Matlot's Roman Catholic School, children enroll at preschool and graduate through the primary and secondary levels. The North Coast School is proud of its achievements in track and field sports, earning national, regional, and international recognition. The school is a true community center where elders return to impart their knowledge to the next generation.
What we have going on here is the net mending program, which is being offered in conjunction with the Caribbean Fisheries. So the Catholic Board approached Caribbean Fisheries to allow this type of program to take place using our school, because our school is the center of the community. And we want to reach out. That's what our school is about. It's about reaching out to the community and allowing everybody to feel that they are part of building up this community through the school.
Catholic schools consistently achieve world-class scholarship. Presentation College in the city of San Fernando is an outstanding secondary college guided by highest academic goals.
Presentation College has been known over the years to be science and mathematics based in terms of their curriculum, and we continue to focus on the sciences. In fact, we have produced many of our doctors and engineers in the country right now. In terms of sports, again, we believe in the holistic development of the young men that come to us, and sports play a very important part in the school's curriculum.
The extracurricular program at Sacred Heart's Boys' School highlights positive activities necessary to promote student-centered growth. At all schools, parental participation programs strengthen family life and learning experiences.
Attention! Mark time!
St. Gabriel Girls RC School is home to long-standing traditions committed to the development of spiritual and human values, alongside nurturing camaraderie and creative talent. Vibrant cultural characteristics at school communities are central to the philosophy of Catholic education.
We really would appreciate our corporate bodies becoming involved. We expect to move more schools into excellence by upgrading the facilities, the physical facilities, by providing additional resources, by upgrading the competencies of the students.
Once we are willing to let people think outside the box, then a lot of very creative things can happen.
Partner with the Catholic Education Board of Management today. With your generous support, together we can continue to deepen the Catholic tradition of quality teaching and learning, developing men and women who work in community, optimizing their talents and positively influencing society.
A lot of important takeaways from there. One, the lady in the Martlot school saying,
Yes.
our school is the center of the community. That
Whole
used to
community.
be the case more than the
schools.
exception. Something
Yes.
went wrong. And that is part of the problem with schools and with the education system.
So it's part of the problem with the communities. So if I think about a community like Belmont, in Belmont, the lawyer, the judge, the doctor, the bad boy, the maid, all lived in the community, all went to the same church, and the children went to the same school. That community had a lot of resources because it was a mixed income community. When we started to build these rich ghettos, and we started to move to Valsay and Westmorelands, and we started to move the rich people out of the community, what happens is you now have an urban ghetto and a rich ghetto that are separated by distance. So whereas before the mother of the bad boy could ask the lawyer or the judge for a little piece of advice after mass and what to do and so to get a little, that's not there anymore. So and because the communities themselves have segregated, the communities that became poorer and poorer now don't have the kind of resources, and the schools don't have the resources. And when you come to a community, like if you take the east-west corridor, if you take St. George East, those communities where you have high gang violence. So if you look at the graph, you'd see the blue is academic watch, and you'll see that the academic watch is in certain places, is in 3 communities, Northeastern, Port of Spain, and St. George.
Yes.
And that's because that's where the poverty really is. And when you have persistent poverty, then you have a different thing. So when I was parish priest in Gonzales, we started a number of initiatives. The two most important for me was the internet cafe, because access to the internet at that stage was rare for poor kids, and became more and more middle class. They had the access. And I knew that a child without access to the internet could not work in the same kind of working environment by the time they were ready to work. And I wanted them to have access.
Hit the job market, or of age to be in the job
because
market.
they wouldn't have had the access, they wouldn't have known the technology, they would be behind. So $1 an hour, and kids would come. And it gave an access, but it also gave us a space to parent the kids. We also put in place a homework clinic. And we took children that would have failed SEA miserably and would not have gotten into any school, and got them into 7-year schools. Why? Because we had teachers in our program who understood learning disabilities and were able to diagnose, and then were able to give them the kind of learning and formation so that when they sat the exam, they were able to do good in the exam. So it's not that the children cannot do well.
And there was a part that was also elements in what you'd call pride in Gonzales.
Yes, so it was a whole thing, pride in Gonzales. One of the things we did was we put cameras in children's hands and said, you know, the newspapers tell us all the bad things about Gonzales. I want to see what's beautiful. And those kids picked up images in Gonzales. It was just beautiful. Tricanal had a big exhibition before one of their shows with all the images. But it was a whole movement to help a community that had become a fairly poor community to understand the resilience, its own resilience, and to start awakening a hope and start having children dream for something better than what they had seen before. And because of that, many kids got through to decent schools after the 11 plus exam or the SCA exam. And I'm saying one of the things we have not found a way to do is to build that directly into the curriculum and do a different form of curriculum that helps children. So one of the experiments we're working with, Tim Conway, he does the whole neuroscience. And his whole, and he's done a lot of research on this, his whole thing is language and children, and especially with things like dyslexia, et cetera, et cetera. He's developed a way of teaching language that does not start with alphabet, but it starts with what you hear and the way you shape your mouth. So just straight bypass the alphabet. And much later down, you come back to the alphabet. What that does, because of the plasticity of the brain, it drills the brain into ways of connecting sounds and mouth movements so that creates a whole new pathway in the brain so that when you introduce the letter, the actual sign, that connects it to that pathway as opposed to the other pathways that would usually be used. And it prepares the whole brain for language. So there are 4 schools where we're trying this out. We're going to start another experiment in September. Nicholas Gomez and his team are looking at a whole way of using technology. So Mitra is an Indian professor who put a computer in a little rural village and found out that kids learned how to use the computer and how to use English, enough English to use the computer, by using the computer. I said, but this is strange. So he put it in a classroom, and he said, but this is interesting. Then he put it in a school that was teaching a very advanced science at A levels with a brilliant teacher. And he got some 11-year-olds doing the same science subject. And the teacher would just give them questions. And 8 of them around one computer, and they're working out the question. When all the 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, and the 17-year-olds both sat the same A-level exam, and they did equal.
Okay. I want to see if I can tie 2 things together again from that video. One in which the teacher, the principal in Sacred Heart Girls was talking about
values,
the development of good character
and values, and the whole person. That's really what Catholic education is. I keep telling our teachers, we are in the formation business. If you ask me what business we're in, we're in the formation business, or the authentic integral development business. We happen to do academics to have the privilege to do formation and development for children.
All right, so that's the connection I wanted to make with when I was looking at the exposition on presentation colleges.
Yes.
And what came to my mind is the extent to which, so the prestige schools,
Yes.
St. Mary's and presentation, and the convents, there is a sense in which they shoot for scholarships, and so that the more scholarships they get, that's the emphasis they're going on. So how do you tie those two things together?
So
and what's the importance of a school producing 20 scholars a year?
In Fatima College, when I went there, Clive Panton was the principal. And that whole school was set up for development, the development of the child. And I don't think if I had gone to another school, I would have done as well or got my way through to having 3 A-level passes. Because, so you had something called activity period, where you could choose to do mechanics, welding, swimming, life-saving. You had 60-something things you can do. And every child got an opportunity to do an activity that they wouldn't normally do. And the whole way the school was set up was for that development of the child. So for me, the quality of a Catholic school is not how the top 20% do. It's how the bottom 20% do. If you're in a prestige school and you get from the top 300 to 500 children in the nation, and the bottom 20% is not getting 5 subjects, there's something fundamentally wrong with your whole education.
So how do you fix that?
Because you have to start looking at education, not just of the scholarship, but every child in the school, we have to get them to achieve their best potential. And we have to drill down by measurement, by highlighting the trends. So one of our projects right now is looking at all the data and bringing the data into one big place and using AI to interrogate so that we start to see some of the things that are happening in our schools and start to see, and down to this child was doing well here and is no longer doing well. What happened there? Every time children go to this classroom, something happens to these children. Why is that? Every time this teacher gets this kind of student, you start to see a different result. Why is that? And they're doing good with other. So you have to start predicting those things and diagnosing much deeper first. Second, we have to change the game. The goalpost is not in scholarships. The goalpost is in every child achieving their fullest potential. And what happens sometimes is the top 20% get the best teachers, and the rest get teachers who are not prepared really to teach. And that's not good enough. We have to bring the teaching standards up for all of our children and all of our teachers. So we're putting in place a quality assurance program where we're measuring a whole lot of stuff. Teacher performance, absenteeism, all kinds of things. So to start to inquire now and see how to help all of our children get to their fullest potential.
So the church has a role, or is seeking or demanding a role in that, in the selection of teachers for schools?
So the Concordat allows us a role. What it says is that the government will propose and we can reject.
Yeah.
I think we have to get to a better place than that, because we have many positions, and this is another thing in the system. So we have so many positions, heads of department in our schools, not confirmed. So many acting positions. I said we could get more Oscar awards than anything else, because every time I go to a school, there's an acting principal, an acting vice principal, an acting head of department, and that's terrible, because if somebody is acting, they really can't lead that school. And if you don't have the heads of department, etc., then you don't have the leadership team to really take the school to the next place. So there's some things that we have to fix. But also in the selection of teachers, we have to be much more proactive, and we have to find the ways to get the best teachers in first, then keep them actively learning how to teach their subject and their students, and third, how to do so in a value system and a character formation that is consistent right through the school.
And that's the point, because I'm going back, listening to the principal from Sacred Heart. If it is at work in that school and in probably other schools, why is there this sense that, the president made a statement talking about what she thought should be in the curriculum. The curriculum committee under Professor Lewis is proposing this new orientation to education, talking about respect and good citizen kind of production, and it's there.
And our mission statement for Catholic education is good citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and great disciples of Jesus Christ, or great followers of God. So our understanding is that there's a dual role, and that's what Archbishop Harris raised, that we have to create a good Catholic student is a good citizen first, and a good disciple second, or a good disciple first and a good citizen second. That this discipleship and citizenship can't be separated out.
Is it difficult for the church to go into those areas where, and you pointed it out before we came on, about the reasons why Catholic schools in some districts aren't doing as well as they should, while others are excelling? And it's not necessarily the teaching, it's not necessarily the education, it's other things having to do with the environment, with the community, with the family situation.
Yeah. So if you look at where we have gangs in Trinidad and Tobago, it's the same places where you have the high gang activities, the same places where the schools are failing. We have 3,600 children in Catholic schools in communities that are failing. And that's a lot of children. Now, when that child has an aunt, an uncle, a brother, a nephew who has died, been killed recently, and you have multiple levels of grief that child is working through. When mom is doing everything possible to hold our family together and does not have the financial resources or emotional, all of these things impact on a child's readiness to learn. To do education in those communities, we have to do a much more community intervention approach, like what we did in Gonzales, and create a whole thing around the community where the community gets behind these children doing excellent and supports those children really becoming great citizens and great disciples, and becomes proud of those children and gets those children to really want to learn and to be expected to learn and to do well in school, which is what we used to do before.
So are there some low-hanging fruit that you want to pick in terms of improving the output of education in the country in Catholic schools? And then
definitely. So the program with Tim Conway is one of them. So we've just done a pilot in the last phases of that. When we see the results, we're going to do that in more schools that are not doing well. The second one is we have to find a way to do like what Matlot and Tabaki did, where you take what is interesting to the child, make it central to your school, and then turn that into ways of getting children interested in learning. So Robinson says that when children get interested, learning happens. And a lot of times we're presenting children with things they're uninterested with. We have a project for schools. It was set up for East Port of Spain. We're widening it right now. It's not cheap. It's going to be about $12 million for a number of schools over a period of time, where we do a community intervention, parent intervention, curriculum intervention, and put the kind of resource into those schools to get the children interested, get the parents on board with learning, offer the parents opportunities of learning themselves, so that we could start turning the communities into being actively participating in learning and supporting the children in learning. So we have that. We have about 15 projects right now that we're working on in all kinds of ways to try and get us to where we need to get to. Because there are a number of key things. So some of those communities have been disrupted by gang violence. We have a school where 2 children were shot, or 2 people were shot right outside the school, not too long in spaces in between. So we have schools in really challenging areas. Those schools we have to do a lot of work with to help turn around. Our good schools, we have to get them to excellence.
And there's a whole other story about, yesterday I was talking with someone working in this division of the Ministry of Education called the Social Services Division. Yes. They are woefully understaffed, woefully under-resourced to treat with some of those things, children in trauma in schools, in communities.
Exactly. And then the other piece is just discerning when a child has a learning problem. Because if you pick up a child's learning problem early, you don't carry that child right through school thinking that they're dumb. You address that early on, you give them the skills that they need for learning and language and numeracy, and then you get that child back into the system doing very well. Those are the things we have to do.
And so it's a conversation ongoing between the church and the Ministry of Education.
It is. A full program we have.
Thank you very much, Archbishop Giles Jason.
Thank you.
I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching.
What the good shepherd has begun.